Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, however you're watching, wherever you're watching, however you're listening, wherever you're listening. It's the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast. Bet Online Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast brought to you by Bet Online. It's been a while, Jamal, a little rusty.
It's been a minute.
Brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online, where the game starts. Also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or go to the app and go to your ultimate fantasy dreams. Use promo code USC LAFB for a $100 bonus. Jamal, happy Kwanzaa, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, all that good stuff. How have you been, buddy?
Doing well, Coach. Great to see you. We were just joking off air. It's been a while. I mean, it's been about 17 or 18 days. First off, hope you're feeling better, Coach. I know you were down with the strep throat, no joke there. And so great to see you up and about and peppy again. And then combination of you being on the sidelines a bit and then, the holiday season. So, it's been about 2.5 weeks, but great to be back with you. And hopefully we'll have Ryan with us next week and kind of get the schedule rolling again. But such a pleasure, my friend. Happy holidays to you and your family, and excited to be doing this. Can't believe we're in 2025. My goodness, it's 24 felt like a blur. The 2020s, honestly, Coach, has felt like a blur. I mean, can you believe half the decade is over? Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. COVID was 5 years ago. I mean, think about that. I mean, it's wild to sort of think about how fast time is moving.
Yeah, it's also wild, like when the holidays come and you legit have little ones and family, how much of that takes up your time.
Totally.
You know what I mean? I'm like, dang, can't record tonight. Got to do more holiday stuff.
Yeah.
Got to do more holiday stuff. Got to do more holiday stuff. It's all good. Dang, it's got to do. And then I'm like, oh, Vegas Bowl. No, holiday stuff. It's like
right.
Never ends.
Exactly.
Even after Christmas, it's just like it just never ends. But we're here, we're back, new year, getting ready for a new season. We're going to catch up on a lot of stuff. Let's catch up on stuff in order. Let's talk about the big gets.
Yep.
So I will say this. And I'm going to say it because fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Go with these moves that Lincoln Riley's doing in the offseason with a lot of caution. And the reason why I say that, and I was one of them that fell victim, I was excited about everything he was doing. And I'm like, he's making all the right decisions and he's doing the right things. It looks like he's going forward. Like, I think he has me convinced. And it was back to the same, right? So he's recruiting D-line. He understood where his problems were, just like he did last year. We got a big get. When we saw this get, you remember I put in the text?
Yeah.
That dude's a mountain. 6'4", 336 out of Rock Mountain, North Carolina, by way of University of Kentucky. Keyshawn Silver is a huge get. That's what we need. The dude can move. The dude can fly. We had to get better there. He was class of, I'm looking right now, expected 2023. He was class of 2023, so I think he has one more year left. I may be mistaken there. But we could use him next year for sure.
Yep.
We could use him up front for sure. So with all the losses, and you always use this on the inputs and outputs, right? We outputted a lot, but I feel like this is an input that was well worth it and well needed, and this was a big improvement up front. Now, what happens and what he does and what we see playing style-wise and cultural-wise is up to the season. But I'm happy about this. We needed a big guy in the middle. We needed somebody to demand the double team. So this was a big move. Your thoughts on that, Matt, man?
No, Coach, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. I think Keyshawn Silver, what I like is it's a proven individual with starting experience in a Power 4 conference in the SEC. You're talking about somebody with 26 tackles, 14 solo tackles, and a sack over the course of last year. You're able to slide him now into that traditional nose, right? He can be that traditional nose tackle. A lot of interior linemen leaving with Meyer, with Clifton, with Sam Green, Elijah Hughes. A lot of those guys were kind of rotational pieces. But now you have Keyshawn Silver there. And then I know, Coach, you're going to get to this. Jamal Jarrett is another nice get from Georgia. Again, with 2 more years of eligibility. I'm a little bit cautious about a Jamal Jarrett because he's only had 9 tackles over 2 seasons at Georgia. And, we've fallen victim into the trap in the past of, do you really want some of these guys that maybe some of these power teams maybe don't want? Or, just because they've been recruited by a big name brand, does that mean they're really going to be high impact guys? Or was there a reason they couldn't sort of break through? Was it a combination of that team's depth and talent? Or was there something perhaps deficient there? So I think Jamal Jarrett is someone that I look at as more of a rotational piece, Coach, but I see Keyshawn Silver as a big-time contributor to this defensive line going into next year. And, Coach, if we zoom out just a bit, if you look at now this defensive line holistically, let's assume Jakeem Stewart's going to play on the interior as opposed to the edge. We're not sure where he's going to be, whether it's edge, whether it's interior. I think that will sort of reveal itself. But let's just, for the sake of argument, assume it's interior. Now you have a Silver and a Stewart on the interior with a Jamal Jarrett, as sort of your rotational piece. And then now on the edges, you've got Cam Fountain potentially on one edge. You've got Anthony Lucas coming back on another edge. And then you got Braylon Shelby as sort of the rotational piece. Throw in a Gus Cordova. Throw in a Jade Abisari. Now you're starting to get a pretty nice room there, Coach, where, dare I say, is defensive line, at least on paper, perhaps a strength of this team, moving forward when you start looking at that room. Obviously, Lucas has to stay healthy. Fountain's progression needs to continue. Shelby's progression needs to continue. And we need to hit on Silver. A lot of ifs there. But the curve is trending in the right direction, where this is now starting to look like a Big Ten quality contending defensive line. And I think that's where we need to be most excited about moving forward.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, when you look at the whole, when you really step back and look at the big picture, only 2 of them are implants and the rest of them are homegrown.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
right.
that's the most important part, I think, is starting to look at too. Like, how many of these guys are homegrown? And then now you look at it, Gus Cordova's an incoming freshman. Brendan Shelby will be sophomore. Sophomore. Anthony Lucas, he's not homegrown, but he's been there for 3 years. So you might as well say that's his new home now. He understands the culture. He'll be on his senior year. Who else am I missing? Shelby. I said Shelby already, right?
Yeah, Shelby's going to be a junior. You got
Cam Fountain's going to be a sophomore.
Yep.
Cam Fountain's going to be a sophomore. So you're starting to get some homegrown guys and guys who are being there and have roots planted there. Now, we all know anything can happen in the spring when the portal opens. Anything can happen next fall. Hopefully they fix that. I think we just need to have an episode on the transfer portal and how bad Mark Emmert completely messed this thing up. But that's neither here nor there. But hopefully they fix it. But the homegrown part, I think, is really, really a key factor to me. The difference between the two guys, though, the reason why I like Silver over Jarrett is because Silver doesn't look 336 pounds, if that makes sense. Like, he's not. He's put together,
right?
Compared to Jarrett. Jarrett is kind of, he has a little flub to him, but it's not the end of the world. I'm not saying anything bad. He's played for SEC. They both play for SEC schools, play for Georgia, so it's not anything bad. But Jarrett can move and Jarrett can run a little bit too, so he might be an issue. And you could get to situations where you could put, not Jarrett, Silver could run. I'm sorry, but you could put Silver at 3 tech. You could put Jarrett at 1 tech, and now you got something big up there, right?
Totally.
Something where you need to move. So. I don't hate it. I kind of love it. It's the right move. But like I said, I'm taking it with a grain of salt. I'm officially from Missouri, and you have to show me. You know what I mean? I can't get too excited about anything anymore, and it's not my fault. This is a situation that Lincoln Riley put me in. You got anything on that, man?
No, Coach. I mean, and I think now, when we keep talking about the inputs here, I think the other element to sort of be excited about, it's so interesting. There's been so much negativity around the offseason, losing the Branch brothers, losing Deuce, losing Joyner, all rightfully so. But over this 17, 18 days where we've been kind of with family in the holidays, really have gotten some nice wins. And Silver and Jarrett being 2 of them from a transfer portal perspective, but finding out Gentry's coming back, I think was huge. There was a big concern there. Would he go with Entz? Or if not go directly with Entz, would the fact that Entz leaving kind of take into consideration that he may move into another situation, just given how much that relationship blossomed over the last 12 months. Now you got Gentry coming back, Kamari Ramsey coming back. I mean, that was a bit of a surprise there.
Yeah.
And I think we can see the whole totality of skills, and I think we'll get into it when we're talking Vegas Bowl. But bringing him back to sort of anchor that secondary, given how much else was lost, I think is very, very significant. And then you look on the other side of the ball, Coach, getting Pregnon back was absolutely huge, right?
Huge.
I mean, we thought we were going to lose him and, lose two others in Mannheim and so forth. And so now only sort of losing two guys instead of three. Now you got three starters coming back. I think is going to be really significant there. So Pregnon coming back, I think Gentry coming back, Ramsey coming back. Those are all wins in and of themselves. And then you throw in a Jarrett, you throw in Silver as the big gets, and now there's reason for optimism here. Now, is this a home run? This team is stacked moving forward? Not necessarily, but at least when you think about the front seven, when we talked about how that line is configured. Now you have a Gentry, now you have a Stevens. Kind of I think being your two primary backers. You're going to have developed the young guys. That's a nice front seven to build around. They've got to continue to stay healthy. I still think there's sort of a depth issue at linebacker right now. There may even be a depth issue on defensive line, given some of these guys hitting. But you're now starting to put the pieces in place to be a really credible front seven. And then, of course, Nicholson coming back in the secondary as well. So now you got Ramsey and Nicholson coming back. So you only have to plug in a few pieces. That element of continuity, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, I think is going to be really, really significant. Now moving forward, I think you got to sort of address the offensive line. You got Page, you got Pregnon, you got Noah. There's still sort of two other slots there, and then that depth, so that offensive line needs to come along, and then not to mention some of the other positions that we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a second. But, I don't think the sky is falling. I think the national media makes you think that the sky is falling for SC because the 5 stars, the big headliners are no longer there and they're leaving. But that's really from a national perspective. For folks that are following this team on a day-over-day, week-over-week basis, sure, there's been some momentum that's been lost, but a lot also has been gained in terms of guys choosing to come back, which sort of speaks to culture, which speaks to the program, which speaks to a desire to being a USC Trojan, and then also getting these 2 transfer portal gets. So things seem to be stabilizing. I think there's going to be maybe a couple of roster moves, but, Coach, it really feels like we sort of know what this roster is now moving forward. Now it's going to be all about development. It's going to be all about maturation, and it's all going to be about cultivation, both on the field, in film, in the weight room, to see if this team can make the requisite jump. Because let's be honest, Coach, we're officially in 2025 now. We're officially in year 4 of the Lincoln Riley era. It is playoff or bust. It is playoff or the moving companies are coming to Palos Verdes. Let's just be very clear here.
Yeah, 100%.
You got to be able to make the 12-team playoff or he should be fired.
Yeah. But it's okay for him to lose 2 games. We're learning that very slowly.
Oh, totally. That's also why, Coach, I don't think it's such a big ask, right, to say, can you make the playoff? I mean, I think we're getting to a place here, and we'll certainly get to a place beyond 2025 when this becomes a 14-team playoff. It's not that big a deal to make the playoff anymore. It's not going to be that big a deal. You just sort of have to win the games you're supposed to win. Even if you lose some of the games you're not supposed to win, you're going to end up sitting there 10-2, 11-2, 10-3, kind of right there to be able to make a playoff appearance. Look, every year in college football, I've said it on social media. I'll say it here again. There's between 3 and 6 teams, 3 and 5 teams that are truly elite. And everybody else there's a step below. Teams are very good. But when you talk about truly elite teams on a given year in college football, a really, really, really rich year in college football is you got 6 elite teams. And that happens maybe once every 6 years. But more often than not, it's 3 to 5 teams that are truly elite, which means you got 7 teams that are going in there that are not really elite to the playoffs. So asking USC to make a jump to be in a top 12 or a top 14 situation is really not that big an ask. And if you cannot do that in year 4, what are we talking about here? So it's not like we're asking them to win the national championship. It's not like we're asking them to get to the Final Four. Although I think those could be reasonable expectations in another world in year 4. just making the 12-team playoff, I think is a very reasonable expectation. If he can't do that, I don't care what the excuse is. I don't care whether it's NIL. I don't care whether it's portal. I don't care whether it's a general manager. I don't care whether it's trenches. I don't care whether it's, not building the Trojan wall. All of the things that we've talked about. The bottom line is he couldn't get it done. And so this is playoff or bust now. We are officially in the playoff or bust 2025 year.
And I think he knows that. I wanted to go back. I think the offensive line depth is pretty good. I think because if I'm not mistaken, the past two classes since he's been there, we've recruited
5 and 5.
And we only lost one, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The depth, I think, is really good. Now it's about, can 2 or 3 of these guys kind of separate and really be part of the rotation? Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
I think Elijah Page, and a lot of people might think I'm crazy, but I think, and I mentioned this with Lincoln Riley, like he needed to be fired before so he can understand what he's going through. But I think the beginning of Elijah Page's Big Ten career, him just getting manhandled and beat, I think that right there is what's going to make him a very, very good offensive tackle.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right.
Like
that Michigan game was such a trial by fire. It was it was such on the job training. And Coach, I remember you and I sort of had a conversation here where, if you recall, so much of the conversation with the fan base and on social media 24, 36 hours after that game was officiating, if you recall. It was like everything's a hold. And, and you and I talked and we said, look, I mean, this is about understanding kind of like the NBA, the era that you're in. This is the difference between the 80s and basketball and today. Look, you just got to sort of understand. They're going to call it both ways. They're going to call it easy both ways. So instead of complaining about the officiating, let's now start adopting that style of play from a physicality standpoint. And it really feels like Page was able to kind of get into the lab, both from a technique perspective as well as from an aggression perspective, and really sort of change and evolve over time. I mean, he's a staple. There's no question about it. I think Noah is very serviceable. Pregnon's become very strong. So, between Pregnon and Page, you feel really, really good. And so now it's about kind of fortifying, not just having bodies and names, but real difference makers on that line moving forward, I think is going to be critical.
No, 100%. When you think about it, and if you go back to Pete Carroll's era, there was always an All-American or two offensive linemen, right? There was actually some type of All-American on every level of the field on both sides of the ball.
Totally.
And it needs to get back to that. Not even has to be on every level of the ball or anything like that, but there needs to be at least 3 on offense, 3 on defense, like it used to be. If you want to be successful, when you look at teams that are successful, it has that. I'm with you though on your comment. Like, it's time for him to win. I just want to kind of just gloat real quick.
Sure.
I'm gonna gloat real quick.
I was waiting for it. I'm surprised we're 18 minutes into the show and you haven't brought this up yet. So.
I have this. I just didn't know which one I wanted to bring up first.
Sure.
The one of, and I've been using this a lot, and my brother's also been using it. The one that the machine controlled people for so long. The machine just controlled it, and the host. If you follow the money, you'll find the issues. And so, when they put these teams in the playoff, I was like, they're not good enough. Follow the money. ESPN owns the contract for the national championship. ESPN owns the contract for the playoff bracket. ESPN owns the SEC TV rights deal. Hold on. Wait a minute. Wait. And it's been like that for a very long time. And I've been saying the conference isn't that good. And everybody, even you said it, well, if they won national championships, this and that, well, when you kind of stick them in there, and Pete Carroll said this, he said, we need a playoff because if any team plays us in the playoff, we'll beat them because we were the best team at that time. Ohio State, if you were to end the season, at the end of the season, people will say Ohio State's not good enough. They just lost to Michigan. They're not good enough. Yeah. Ohio State is the best team in the nation right now.
Totally.
Because they're hot and they're in the playoff, right? And so it's just starting to come to fruition with this SEC stuff. Everybody got to play on the level playing field, starting to come to fruition. And I will say this, Oregon did lose. Oregon did get smoked. But I'm going to give Oregon a pass. And I'm going to tell you why I'm going to give Oregon a pass, Arizona State a pass, Georgia a pass, even though they're SEC school. I don't think they deserve the bye, but it is what it is. And the reason why I'm going to give Boise a pass, they were off since December 8th.
Right.
And they played their first game almost a month later. Anybody who doesn't understand that doesn't understand football. And the best example I could give you is I could go get a 300-pounder right now, and I could have them lean on you for 6 plays. And let's see how you feel after that, right? It takes 4 games to get into game shape. Those dudes were not in shape. Like, they were in physical shape. Yes, they're in physical shape, but they weren't in game shape. And you saw it with all 4 of those schools. But the schools that came in that played the week prior or the 2 weeks prior, who were like coming off of bye week, you could tell the difference in play. So I think they got the teams right for the playoff. I think they have the formatting wrong. I will say that. So Oregon does give a reprieve, but they still did the same thing that they always do. So
no, Coach. I mean, I think you're spot on. Look, I think the 12-team playoff is so much fun for the sport. Whether we argue whether it's a big deal or not a big deal to make the playoff, I think it's just fun for the sport. I think that the wrinkle has to be, look, if you win your conference, if you win a Power 4 conference or you're a top 5 conference champion, you get the automatic bid, but no guarantee of seeding. It's just like March Madness in college basketball. No one, just because you win your conference tournament doesn't mean you're guaranteed to be a 1 seed or a 2 seed. You're just guaranteed as an automatic bid. If they just did that, I think this thing gets corrected. Because to your point, Coach, Oregon got hammered. They got beat down. They got smoked. They got destroyed. And I think collectively as a Trojan family, we were all sort of enjoying and basking in that, particularly given just the nature of USC Oregon the last 10, 15, 20 years. But if we take a step back, in fairness, when you go back and look at a situation, Oregon versus Penn State in the Big Ten championship game, and I told you Oregon beats Penn State, and their reward for that is to play Ohio State versus Penn State. Yeah, they have to play an extra game, but they get SMU at home and they get Boise as their 2 games versus the winner has to go play Ohio State. There's something wrong with how you're doing the seeding. And I think if you took a step back and just said, look, Oregon should have been the 1 seed. I think, they got smoked, but they were 13-0. They were Big Ten champions. I think that was correct. I think it needed to be sort of some combination of Oregon, Penn State, Georgia, Texas as your top 4. Ohio State was probably 5, and then you sort of go from there. And then what that would have created would have been a couple of things. I think it would have created a really fun 4-5 matchup between Penn State, Ohio State, and sort of a rematch in the quarterfinal. But I think it would have allowed some of these lesser teams, the quote-unquote Cinderellas, to be able to play each other. And then the winner starts becoming kind of that true Cinderella, like it is in March Madness. You start building the momentum for the Cinderella. And then when you have to sort of see a David versus Goliath in a quarterfinal or beyond, it becomes even more compelling. And so I know that they've been talking about fixing that. I think if they fix that, it'll really help a tremendous deal. Because, Coach, I want to take a step back and back to sort of the conversation of 3 to 5 elite teams. I think we know Ohio State's elite. I think we know Texas is elite. They had a bump. They got really lucky there, but they're an elite team. I think Notre Dame is an elite team. I think they sort of showed that. I don't know about Penn State yet. They're in the semifinal, but all they had to do was beat SMU at home and then beat Boise. And Boise showed that while Genty and that team have been so compelling, and Genty has been so phenomenal all year, the fact that Boise didn't play a top 20 rushing defense all year also sort of showed up a little bit, where with Boise, all you got to do is put 8-9 in the box and then just make the quarterback beat you, and they couldn't do it. So it was a pretty simple game plan because they just didn't have enough outside of Genty. So how good is Penn State? I don't know yet. They've been the beneficiary of a nice bracket. I think you and I both believe that it's going to be Ohio State, Notre Dame in this championship game in a pretty compelling way. But I think if you can fix this seeding situation, I think it's going to be really fun next year, this group of 12.
Where in the history of brackets have you ever seen the number 1 seed play a 5 seed? You know what I mean? You should see the
coach. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, honestly, Ohio State, Oregon, there's an argument that could have been the Natty. I mean, in terms of, so for Oregon's reward for going, and look, I mean, we're SC. We're always going to be anti-Oregon. They think they're the West Coast power. We're all the true West Coast blue blood. Now, back and forth we go in terms of the jawing on social media and message boards and what have you. But, as a 13-0 Big Ten champion, number 1 seed, your reward is you got to play Ohio State as your first game with a month off. That's insane. That's ridiculous compared to the team that lost had such an easier road. And what it reminds me of a little bit, Coach, is this sort of month off phenomena. Do you remember early in the BCS era, there was so much conversation around, man, this month off changes everything. And you remember how many in the 1-2 game, the number 1 versus number 2, how many upsets we had where number 2 beat number 1 early in the BCS era? Like Tennessee beat Florida State, and then Oklahoma beat, Florida State, and then in 2002, Ohio State upset Miami. And then you saw, Florida upset Ohio State that one year. And, even with Texas upsetting USC.
Yeah, Texas upset USC.
It was so many of the 2s beat the 1s early in the BCS because, again, that 1 month off, it seemed like that number 1 team kind of lost their edge. Yep. And the number 2 team, as the underdog, played with a greater sense of edge. And I think we're seeing something similar here where the top 4 seeds sort of lost a little bit of pep. I think coaches are going to do different things now to make sure that motivation level remains high. But I think what reseeding does also is it gives some of those top 4 seeds a bit of a reprieve where, if your first game after a bye is like SMU or Boise or Arizona State, there's a little bit more of a margin for error. Like you didn't play your A game, but you also didn't play Ohio State, know, so you're probably going to get by in that game. And then you've got the lather back, and then you're ready to make kind of a deeper run from the semis and onward. So I think this reseeding is going to really help on a lot of levels.
And I just want to say this. It's great to say that we play in the best conference in college football.
Totally. Absolutely.
And nobody could argue that. There's no way you could argue that hands down, like we play in the best conference in college football right now.
Look at the connection of Ohio State to LA Football Network, to USC, in terms of like if Ohio State wins the national championship, I mean, remember how much conversation there was this time last year around, is Lincoln Riley going to go get Will Howard, right? I mean, Will Howard, we were on the flight to Manhattan, Kansas. Lincoln was to kind of recruit Will Howard. Obviously, Miller blew up in that Holiday Bowl. History played out the way it did, but Will Howard was close to being a USC Trojan. Mr. Chip Kelly was the head coach across town coach, and he's about to sort of puff out his chest to potentially be a national championship winning OC. So there's all these sort of interesting storylines with Ohio State and kind of a connection to LA in a unique way.
Yeah, and I will say this. This comes from a Duck itself. He projected that it'll be an Oregon USC rematch in the Big Ten championship. Because he was like, both of the schedules are walks. I was like, nah, we got to play Michigan and Notre Dame. And then he made it, he's like, Notre Dame doesn't count. He was like, so if you beat Michigan at home and you lose.
You're talking about next year?
Next year, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He was like, our toughest game is SC next year. And then he was like, Notre Dame doesn't count. So
our schedule next year, Coach, is a very nice schedule. I mean, that's schedule, also why there's really no excuse. You can't. I mean, you really are grasping for straws. I know, our when we talk and we love our fellow content creators and there's such a camaraderie there. And I know we all try and look at things from a positive standpoint. There is no other way to spin this. If this team cannot make the playoff in 25 with that schedule, especially when you look at, the early games, you're taking 2 non-power 4 teams, including Georgia Southern. Clay Helton going to be returning to the Coliseum. You got your third game is against Purdue, a team that won 1 game this year. Fourth game at home against Michigan State. I mean, the whole month of September is sort of a glorified preseason. And then the only 2 tough games at Oregon, at Notre Dame. Home against Michigan is going to be tough as well, given the momentum I think Michigan has been able to gather here. That's the 3 tough games. One of those is non-conference. I mean, in theory, SC could probably lose at Oregon and home against Michigan. It's not what we're projecting or what we're even going to say is going to happen in any way, shape, or form. But just hypothetically, could probably lose both of those games and still make it into the playoff. So there's really no excuse for next year.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. Now I'm talking about my brother. He was just like, you beat Michigan at home, even if you lose to Oregon and lose to Notre Dame, you'll play Oregon again because you only have 1 loss in conference, and then it'll be Oregon, SC in the Big Ten championship, you're in. I was like, damn, I didn't even think about it like that. Like, and then he's
I mean, now we have to see what Ohio State does, of course.
Right.
Michigan. But the point is very strong. Where
yeah.
Look, I think we've seen it where you can lose one game in conference and you're going to be okay.
Right, and so then he closed it with, if you guys can't do that, you need a new coach.
Totally.
And so that's definitely. Let's move on. We got distracted. I'm sorry about that, but I had to throw that in there. Let's talk about that Vegas Bowl.
Yeah.
I'm tired of playing in the Vegas Bowl. I'm tired of being a Vegas Bowl, Holiday Bowl champ. I just want to let you know that. I had no excitement about this bowl game because I don't think we should have been there. I will say this. Lemon is going to be a dude, and I'm so happy Lemon's going to be a dude. I wish Joyner would have stayed because everybody thinks I'm crazy when I said that Joyner is better than Woody Marks.
Yeah.
And when I say that, they look at Joyner and they forget Joyner's a sophomore and Woody Marks was a senior. Like, let's look at projection.
Freshman, coach. He was freshman and senior.
Oh, he was. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, let's look at the projection. The projection is better than Woody Marks. So that's how I was looking at it. But that game, man, was the season, right? That's the best way I could describe it. You're just like, there were so many highs and lows, and just like, and I will say this: I respect Texas A&M. I respect the coach. I respect Mike Elko. I think Mike Elko is one of those coaches I put like Jeff Teffer and all those guys on. Like, I really like this coach. Like,
he's a good coach.
Yeah, I respect Mike Elko. So he was gonna have those dudes ready. But at the end of the day, like, it's a 45-minute plane ride. You know what I mean? Like, you just got done playing your season. Like, you got to be ready to go. Like, it's basically a home game for you. And it's just the highs. And they just look so out of sync. If we don't have 6, we lose that game. I'm just being honest. If we don't have 6 and 8, let me tell you that. Because somebody hit me up on Instagram and they made on Twitter, and they made a very good point. They said the wide receiver room was too crowded. Now that it's just Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon, I think that's a lot better. And I kind of agree with him with that. I think that wide receiver room was a little bit too crowded. And now that you have 2 guys that could go and play, you see it a lot better. I'm going to say it, and people are going to think I'm crazy. We need a quarterback. We won't be successful without a quarterback. I don't think he's ready. It's one of 2 things. It's either he's not ready or he's not good enough. So if he's not ready, we'll find out. If he's not good enough, we'll find out, right? Because he has plenty of reps now. He gets a spring. He gets a fall. He should be able to come in. Like you said, September is a glorified preseason. So when it matters, we'll find out if he's good enough. I think he's way too sporadic. His decision-making is questionable. You know what I mean? So those are things that matter. The one thing I did like is that they didn't quit. But I'm not going to fall for it because they pulled the same act that they pulled last year in the Holiday Bowl, and we ended up in the same situation. So with that being said, I wasn't okay. We won. I'm excited we won, but I'm not going to be happy. I'm no longer going to be happy about winning Holiday Bowls and Vegas Bowls and Duke Mayo Bowls. Like, I want losing the home game in the first round, winning home game in the first round, playing in Orange Bowls, like playing in the bowl games that matter. Like, it's time for us as fans and content creators and commentators and people reporting on this to start setting the standard higher.
Yes.
Because if we keep setting the standard at, we won the Vegas Bowl, we're going to be great next year. We didn't do it, but we won the Holiday Bowl. We'll be better next year. Like, we can't keep falling for the same story. I think we have to put the pressure and make people understand where the pressure is and how it needs to be and set the standard in order for us to do that. The game was good. They won. Congratulations. But, like, I wasn't fairly impressed. I'm not falling for that story again. I should put it like that. What do you got on there, man?
Yeah, Coach, I think you laid it out really well. I had sort of 5 kind of takeaways, and we can sort of take it in any direction you want from that. The first is, I think you said it best. The term that's going around is lemonade, right? Between 6 and 8 here, between Lemon and Lane. And I think, Coach, you said it best. It was a crowded room. And I think those guys acknowledge Deuce, Branch, Hudson sort of acknowledge that it's a crowded room, and you got to go and look for the best situation possible. You're getting into junior year. You're getting into senior year. You have to sort of be able to now get into a situation where you can accrue the stats. And what I found really ironic, Coach, is Lemon was always your guy, as the guy that was going to emerge as wide receiver one. And Lane was always my guy, as the guy that was going to emerge as wide receiver one. And look who's left. It's Lemon and Lane. So I think you and I are pretty good in terms of evaluating talent. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun in 2025, kind of a friendly competition between you and me of who sort of emerges as the true number one. I think Lemon sort of has a lead in terms of kind of receptions and yards. But let's not forget, Coach, I mean, Lane had 12 touchdowns now this year over the course of the season, 6 in the last 2 games. The two of them together, I think, is a tremendous combination. And when you look at the 7 for 127 and the 3 touchdowns for Lane, you look at the 6 for 99 with Lemon, including that spectacular kickoff return. I just think they complement each other so well. Lemon is a guy you can basically do all the things that you wanted to do with Zach Branch. I mean, between the bubble screens and the jet sweeps and the explosives in the special teams and just the ability to get the yak. I mean, Lemon is going to be your guy all the way. I've always sort of compared him to Alvin Kamara just in terms of how he runs with the ball. He's almost a receiver pre-reception, and then he becomes a running back post-reception, and that's what makes him so special. And then Lane is your classic big body, receiver. I just feel so much of Dwayne Jarrett there. And I think that the only question for Lane is going to be, can he continue to develop some physicality? If guys are going to start bumping and running him more, and playing more press man coverage on him, is he going to be able to kind of get that separation? Is he going to have the strength to be able to fend them off? And I think that's going to be part of his evolution this year. But number one was just Lemon and Lane being the unquestioned wide receiver 1A and 1B moving forward. And Coach, I've said this for years now, I believe very strongly in hierarchy in your wide receiver room. I don't think you can do it by committee and truly be a great team. So solidifying those two guys, I think we have to be very excited about. Number 2, I thought Brian Jackson, Coach, ran really hard in that game, and Sanders is now coming in as more of that scat back, the quick back. But Jackson, and I know some of this was going around on social media, and one of my buddies told me this even before we were on the text thread, and it's like, man, it feels a lot like Lendale, doesn't it? From the number 21, the lower plate on, the lower back plate to just the running style. All he needs is a little bit of tint in that helmet, Coach, and we're ready to go there. So I think Jackson being a potential weapon as a power back to sort of complement Sanders next year and perhaps go into more of a 2-back look there, I think is something to be very, very excited about. Third, I thought the guys we mentioned a little bit earlier, too, in particular, Cam Fountain and Shelby, I thought had really good games. Shelby had that sack. Fountain, it felt like, was sort of disrupting the backfield pretty consistently. There were 6 or 8 times where he beat his man or he disrupted the flow of the play, and you got to be really excited about that off of the edge. And I think the two of them, along with Lucas, kind of creating a 3-man edge rotation is really more of what we want to see moving forward. The fourth, having Kamari Ramsey back, Coach, I thought was significant. We finally saw some of those ball skills. We had this conversation with Tim, our good friend Tim Prangley, and we talked about the ball skills that Kamari Ramsey showed last year at UCLA was very significant. We didn't get a chance to see that this year, just given situation, given stylistically some of the teams that we were playing. So we saw Ramsey more as sort of a downhill thumper in the box, kind of, limiting plays out to the running back in the flat. But that interception showed those elite ball skills because it's there. So having him back, I think, is significant. And then we got a close, Coach, with Mayhem. I mean, to your point, I think where the positive is that he didn't quit. He kept his head up. They came back and won the game. But, my God, there was some atrocious decision-making there the first 2.5, almost 3 quarters of that game. At one point, Coach, he was 11 for 27 with 3 interceptions and the 1 touchdown. And while I was very encouraged by the comeback, look, you go back and look at that tape, Coach, those were all 1-read throws. I mean, that was a function of a lot of busts on that back end. A&M kind of got really busted with their zone. There were a lot of zone busts in the last quarter. I think it was a combination of them trying to play a little bit too much prevent with the 17-point lead and then miss assignments. Elko even mentioned it. He's like, what happened to the zone defense the last 18 minutes of that game? And if you go back and look, it wasn't really Maeva kind of dissecting a defense. It was basically Lemon's open. He's my first read. lane is open. He's my first read. They found some soft spots in the zone. So credit to Maeva for getting them the ball. But I don't know if even on that last drive, Coach, he caught the tip ball back to himself. That was a loss of 3. There was a huge airmail to Kyle Ford. I mean, it was touch and go even on that last drive. So there's a lot of work to be done here, Coach. Can he read defenses is going to be the question moving forward, because right now everything that he's shown through 4 games is he's a one-read quarterback. And if you go back and look at the totality of work here, 6 interceptions, a 7 turnover with the fumble in 4 games. And, Coach, I would argue that the ball has really bounced his way in these 4 games. I mean, let's go back and look at the Nebraska game. End of the fourth quarter of that game. I mean, there was a couple balls in harm's way early in that game, and then late in that game, there was that sort of double doinker, if you will, where he got hit on that last drive. The UCLA game was ugly. I mean, only 19 points. Notre Dame, there were moments there, but it was a lot of 50-50 jump balls. And then, it sort of disintegrated there with the 2 pick sixes. And now this body of work. So 4 games, there's some good there, but you're really concerned about his ability to be able to dissect defenses week over week. And if he can't do that, that's going to be the real fascination here moving forward. For Lincoln Riley, he's got to take a step back and say, look, if this is the make it or break it year for me, is Jaden Maeva going to get me to the playoff? Yes or no? And that really is the ultimate question, in many ways, the only question for the next 9 months that should be important to USC fans.
So let's do it. Let's do it. I know who could get him to the playoff.
Here we go.
So everybody keeps saying, from what we're hearing, money's not an issue. The NIL's up to par. They're able to pay anybody. They could compete with the top NIL. That's what we're hearing, right? Quinn Ewers gets him to the playoff, 100%. Quinn Ewers, year 4 in college, game slows down. He's been rated a first-round quarterback for the past 2 years, right? Quinn Ewers gets him to the playoff. Go pay Quinn Ewers and get to the playoff. If you want your job, you open the checkbook for that kid. I'm just being honest. If Maeva goes somewhere, it's unfortunate. We have Longstreet, right? And Ryan mentioned this a while ago, and when he mentioned it, I kind of looked at it. He's like, the days of having Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart, Mark Sanchez, John David Booty, those days are over, right? You have your guy and you have a backup. Look at Georgia right now. I mean, I will say this, that Gunner kid, go get Gunner. Let's go get that kid. I'll take a chance on Gunner. That dude,
he's got a lot of Baker to him, doesn't he? There's a Baker gamer element to him. I thought he played really well. I mean, they just turned the ball over and got kind of crushed there. But no, Coach, I think you're spot on. I mean, Ewers is a guy who understands defenses. He's played for Sark. He's mobile. I mean, you've seen him kind of take off and run. Consistency has been an issue over the years with him. Staying on the field with injury has been an issue with him.
I was going to mention that, injury.
But taking that aside, he's a proven commodity here because he's now quarterbacked 2 consecutive playoff teams with a run. If Texas wants to really start the Arch Manning era next year, he's available. I agree with you. I don't know if we have seen over 4 games. Take the record aside of 3-1. I mean, that 3-1 could have been 1-3 pretty easily too.
1 play away.
1 play away, Coach. It's one. That's the problem with the 1 play away, right? It can go both ways. We only talk about it going one way. We don't talk about it going the other way, and that's the problem with the 1 play away philosophy. But over 4 games, a 4-game body of work, do we feel confident that Maeva is unquestionably the guy that's going to get this team to the playoff? I don't think so. And I think that right now there's serious questions about his ability to dissect the defense. And yes, he's mobile, but I don't think he's the mobile quarterback that, we thought, Caleb was, or a Baker Mayfield was, or a Kyler Murray was. He's mobile. He can get out of situations, but is he that much more mobile than an Ewers? Not really. They're about the same in terms of mobility. Maybe Maeva's incrementally more mobile than Ewers, but when you sort of offset it with Ewers' ability to throw the ball, dissect defenses, manipulate defenses with his eyes, different arm angles, Ewers is a far more polished quarterback. Now, of course, the question is, Coach, the asking price for Ewers is going to be very high. I mean, you're talking about a $3 million a year type of situation. Yeah. Maeva has probably renegotiated his contract after the 4 games and being kind of the starter. You're paying Longstreet. You paid, reportedly $2 million for Jakeem per year. I mean, is there just enough cheese to go around there? That's the question.
And they're saying it is. They keep telling us.
I think what is being said is, look, there's enough NIL to be competitive. I don't know if there's enough NIL where it's blank check time. So I think that's really the question. And then the argument becomes, are you gonna, if you pay Ewers $3 million, what happens to Maeva? Are you paying him $1 million to just sit on the bench and Longstreet? You're going to want one of these guys to transfer because you got so much money blocked into guys that aren't going to impact 2025 when you still have needs on offensive line and you still have needs on defensive line. We're liking the direction where it's going, but I don't think it's a finished product completely on either line. That has to be the priority as well. So it's interesting. And this is also why so much of the conversation is this role of a general manager is so critical now moving forward to these elite college programs, because you got to be able to make some of those strategic decisions from a financial perspective as well.
Let me ask you this. If your job is on the line, is Quinn Ewers worth the $3 million?
Yes. If your job, yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's where it is.
And I think that's the level of urgency. Now the question is, does he think he can evolve Maeva, right? You're the quarterback guru and the 3 Heismans and the 5 NFL quarterbacks and all of that, right? I mean, that's what you're known for. Now the question becomes, do you believe you've seen enough in those 4 games that you can take that cement and sort of go Michelangelo and sort of turn it into the statue of David, right? I mean, that's really the question, because I think we're all in agreement that the version of Maeva right now, this current version, the January 2nd, 2025 version of Jaden Maeva is not good enough, in my estimation, to get SC to the playoff. The only way SC gets to the playoff is, they with the schedule breaks, maybe ball bounces their way a la 2022, maybe. But just eye test, this version right now of Jaden Maeva, I don't believe is good enough to get USC to the playoff. So the question is, does Lincoln believe there's enough there where he can get them ready by September 1st? To be able to make a playoff run. And that is what is ultimately that judgment, that strategic choice, and that critical judgment, Coach, is ultimately, I think, what is going to define whether or not he keeps his job.
Well, yeah, and those you also have to ask the questions, and this is the question I have, and it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the question that you ask Lincoln Riley or Lincoln Riley asks himself. If I'm going to go down, am I going to go down swinging?
Right.
Or am I just going to go down with the sinking ship, right? To me, I'm going down swinging, and I'm going to go get Quinn Ewers. They already let Malik Neighbors, the guy that went to Oregon State.
Malik Murphy.
They already let him go. They should have got him to go back home. I think you had a better chance with Malik Murphy also. But when you really think about it, though, this quarterback class that was kind of in the portal, it's kind of like the quarterback class that's coming out in the draft. It's not
a little
crazy.
Soft.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not like, oh, these are some guys you got to get. Like, you know what I mean? And I think there's other reasons to that. I think the transfer portal affects that. They don't really establish yourself. But, I mean, all the tampering that's going on, I'm calling Gunner. Hey, bro, what do you need? Yeah. No, I mean, I have to. Yeah, I'm trying to save my job. What do you need? I can make you. I've played with quarterback like you before. You got a little bit to you. Like, you're a guy. Like, so those are the chances that I'm taking. It's just, what chances is he willing to take? And what is he going to do to save his job? He has to know that his job is not safe. He has to know that he's the number 1 coach on the hot seat, according to the hot seat website. Like, he is the guy. His seat is white hot. So what are you going to do to cool it off? What are you going to do to get the nitrogen and put it on the fire and make it go away so your seat is frozen and you get freezer burn? Like, frostbite, I'm sorry. What are you going to do? So, like, in my mind, I'm doing whatever I can to keep my job. But at the end of the day, I don't know what he's going to do. And it's like, all we could do is see, and he does a really good job of, hey guys, look what I did. But then when it's time to pay, he falls short. You know what I mean? So those are my worries behind it. You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely, Coach. And so again, it's going to be a really interesting next couple of months because the transfer portal has closed in the sense that no new players can go in the portal for this cycle. December 28th was the last day, with the exception being depending on when your season ended. Correct. So you have 5 days since your season ended. So now the teams that lost today and yesterday, for instance, Georgia and Oregon and all those guys, now they have 5 days from the time their season ended to decide whether they want to go in the portal or not. And then the same is going to be said 8-9 days from now with the losers of the semifinal, and then 10 days subsequently with the loser of the final. And then we've got that 10-day window in April, from April 16th to April 25th to say, hey, can you fill in any holes? At that point, though, Coach, April feels late. That feels like kind of an emergency stopgap. So you sort of know who's in and who you want to go after right now. I think SC's done a terrific job with these two gets on the defensive line and, the guys that have announced that they're coming back. But we'll close where we open, Coach. It comes down to inputs and outputs. This was a team that went 7-6 with Ramsey, with Pregnon, with Nicholson. You get Gentry back. Is Silver and Jakeem and Jarrett, significantly greater than what we had with Clifton and Meyer and Green? That's the question. Because if the inputs relative to the outputs, if you're only incrementally better, a few percent better, are you really moving the needle from a 7-6 team, right? That's how we got to think about this. So to me, I think there's more work to be done, and we got to get aggressive here these next couple of weeks to really elevate and take that next step. I think the world of Jakeem. I think it's going to be very exciting. To me, the only question I would have, though, is look where we were with Corey Foreman, Coach, 2 years ago, right? Corey Foreman was the Jakeem Stewart of 2022, right? I mean, the number one player in California. We thought he was going to be the savior. So it doesn't always pan out, right? I mean, everything is sort of a gamble. There's always sort of a risk to things. And the fact that Stewart didn't play competitive football this fall, that makes me a little squirmish. I'll be very honest with you. But I think the upside is just significant. He's destined for superstardom. So hopefully that pans out. Jarrett was kind of sort of often, a sporadically used individual at Georgia. And then Silver was a credible starter. So is that three significantly greater than the three that we had in the interior? And then couple that with, are we going to see massive jumps from Fountain and Shelby and Lucas being healthy and Gentry being healthy? I think that's really the question to get this team to the next level, because everybody else is there. We kind of see Maeva. We're seeing, what we've got on the offensive line. That, to me, is the big question. Are these guys going to make that significant next jump to go from 7-6 to a playoff berth, and then hoping that, the ball bounces SC's way a bit more this year with an easier schedule?
I will tell you this before we get out of here. The biggest loss was Zion Branch.
Yes.
The biggest loss was Zion Branch. People might say, oh, it's big. It's Kamari Ramsey and Zion Branch at safety in that defensive backfield. They're two in the same, and you can rotate them and roll them and do the same thing.
Yes.
And I don't think, and I know they're packaged deal and they're brothers, but I would have told my brother, like, man, good luck. I fit here. I don't think that there's enough time for Zion Branch to be as good as he would have been this year. You know what I mean? Like, this was the third year. He's been in the system long enough. He's been there long enough. There's not enough time for him to be as good as he would have been this year. And it's unfortunate. I've always been a fan of Zion Branch. And I think that's I think Ramsey and Branch in that defensive backfield at safeties would have been really, really good.
Yes,
I think
agreed.
That's the biggest loss. So that's what I'm going to close it on. But we got a lot to talk about and to get through. I got some recipes until spring ball, so
I love it, Coach. Well, look, man. I mean, we got 8 months now of to talk about before September 1st. So it's going to be a fun off season, my friend. We're officially in it, and obviously, as soon as things break with players or news, it always seems like there's something going on with SC. We got you covered, and we're back on a very regimented schedule now in the new year, and so it's always going to be a fun time, Coach, in 25.
Man, I enjoyed it. We get to do it again. Start off the new year with a new show. Let's keep rolling. Fans, I enjoy you. It's the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast. You guys know how to go. Live free, fight on.